Well, hello again and happy Wednesday. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the first couple chapters of Hatchet and did well in your Google form yesterday. Today's video won't be as long, I promise. Okay. All right. So, our critical content for today is that I can determine how a character responds to challenges by what they say or do. So, again, a challenge is something that causes problems for the character. And a response is what actions the character does because of it. Okay. And then we are also going to understand the meaning of words in the context of the story to help you comprehend better. Okay. So there's going to be some vocabulary today. Again, on our performance scale, we are working on RL2. And this little part of RL2, it's a big standard, but we're going to be focusing on how characters respond to challenges in the story. So, how Brian responds to the challenges that he's facing. Okay, so I want you guys to get out your ISNs if you brought those home, or if you don't have that, you need to have some notebook paper or a spiral notebook or something that you are taking notes in. And you are going to take notes on these 5 vocabulary words because you might see them in a test on the end of the week. Okay, so the first word is wallow. It is found on page 26. It means to flounder about, to proceed clumsily with difficulty, with difficulty. All right. And then the second word is hordes. That's found on page 34 of Hatchet. It means a large group or mass. Next word is agony. That's found on page 35. That means intense, extreme physical pain, agony. Abating is on page 36. It means to reduce in intensity, to diminish or lessen. That means something is abating, it's lessening, it's being reduced in intensity. Squint. So, kind of like when you do this, that's a squint. It's to look through eyes partially closed. So, again, kind of like this. You're squinting to see something. Okay, that's what it means to squint. All right, so you can pause the video and write down the definitions of these words. Okay, so we're at the point in the story where Brian knows the pilot's dead. And he is flying 6,000 feet up in a little plane all by himself. He's this 13-year-old kid. He's doesn't really know much about flying a plane other than what the pilot showed him briefly in chapter 1, and a little bit of what he's read from books. So, how does he respond to this? I took a little excerpt from the book and put it up here, and I want you to be asking yourself, what does the character do? Okay, so a problem has happened. Well, his problem is the pilot is dead, had a massive heart attack, and he's in this plane all alone, and he's got to figure out how to survive. He's got to figure out how to land this plane somehow. I thought I turned off that. It's my team. You guys are texting me right now. All right, so anyway, so I want you to be thinking, what does the character do? What does Brian do? So I'm going to read this bit. This is after he's kind of gotten over his initial shock of realizing what is transpiring. Okay, so he says, please, Brian said, but did not know what or who to ask. Please. The plane lurched again, hit more turbulence, and Brian felt the nose drop. It did not dive, but the nose went down slightly, and the down angle increased the speed. He knew that at this angle, the slight angle, he would ultimately fly into the trees. He could see them ahead on the horizon, where before he could only see sky. He had to fly it somehow. He had to fly the plane. He had to help himself. The pilot was gone, beyond anything he could do. He had to try and fly the plane. He turned back in the seat, uh, Feen the front. I don't think that's a typo. And put his hands, still trembling, on the control wheels, his feet gently on the rudder pedals. He pulled back on the stick to raise the plane. He knew that from reading. You always pull back on the wheel. He gave it a tug and it slid back toward him easily, too easily. The plane, with the increased speed from the tilt down, swooped eagerly up and drove Brian's stomach down. He pushed the wheel back in, went too far this time, and the plane's nose went below the horizon, and the engine speed increased with the shallow dive. Too much, so he pulled back more gently this time, and the nose floated up again. Too far, but not as violently as before. Then down a bit too much, then up again, then down. So you can visualize this plane just kind of, doing this in the sky. And the front of the engine, cowling, settled. When he had it aimed at the horizon and it seemed to be steady, he held the wheel where it was, let out a breath, which he had been holding the whole time, and tried to think of what to do next. Okay, so how does Brian handle the problem of steadying the plane? Okay, pilot's dead. There's no one there but him. So what does he do? Think about what the character does. How does he respond to this problem? Okay, so right in the text, you can see that he decided in his head, he had to fly it somehow, had to fly the plane, had to help himself. He had to try and fly the plane. And so he remembered you pull back on the stick to raise the plane, and he knew that from reading. So he's recalling these little bits of information, his background knowledge of things that he's read in the past that help him to figure out how to solve this problem. Besides, the pilot also kind of showed him a little bit of flying at the very beginning of the story. Remember that? Okay. And then at the end, he let out a breath, which he had been holding the whole time, and tried to think what to do next. Okay. So now he's got the plane steady, and now he's got to figure out what is his plan of action. He can't fly forever, right? Okay. So let's move on. This was one of your questions from yesterday in your Google form. And it says, how does Brian respond to the challenge of being left alone to fly the plane? Okay, so what does he do? He has a complete meltdown and cries, or he remembers what the pilot taught him, things from books he has read, and he rehearses mentally over and over again what to do. He panics and then goes into shock, or he was able to get rescued using the radio. Okay, which one of those shows an action of what he does to solve the problem? Right. Okay, he remembers what the pilot taught him. He remembers things from books, and he rehearses what he's going to do over and over in his head, and devises that plan. Okay, so you're independent today. Unfortunately, I'm not going to read to you today. You are going to read chapters 3 and 4. And using your book, you're going to answer these questions on the Google form today for chapters 3 and 4. And what I would do, if I was a really smart fifth grader, I would have my Google form up on my screen, my book in my hand, and I would be reading and answering my questions as I got to those using the book. So kind of preview the questions, know what's going to be asked of you. That's always a smart test-taking tip to do. And then have the Google form open with the book and do them at the same time. It'll save you some time, okay? All right, you guys, have a fantastic day figuring out what Brian's going to do next, okay? Does he land the plane safely? Does it crash and just break the plane into smithereens? What happens to him? And then what new challenges is he going to face? What's he going to do to try to solve those challenges? How is he going to respond to those? Be thinking about all those things. Happy reading today, and we will see you tomorrow. All right, bye-bye.